NewsRadio WRVA.
All right, 7:34 here on News Radio WRVA. Good morning, everyone. It is Monday, March 30th. So, what'd you do this weekend? I worked in the show, went to Costco, went to church, went to breakfast at Satterwhite's, and I did not protest. I didn't go to the No Kings protest. I was actually thinking of going just to experience it, but then I thought, I got better things to do. See, if you would just look at the local media and the national media, oh my gosh, these No Kings protests were so big and so important. And I'm here to tell you why they're not, okay? Follow me here on Richmond's Morning News. So I've been to these protests before. I've seen these protests before. And the one thing that struck me is there's just a lot of different people there for a lot of different reasons. So on Friday's show, we told you there was going to be not one, but two No Kings protests right here in Richmond, Virginia. Wow, it's so big that they actually have to have two different protests because, no, that wasn't it. The reason they had two different protests is the people that organized it couldn't get along and come up with one big protest, so instead they decided to have two protests because one wanted to march, one wanted to sing songs, one cared that there was a LGBT market going on at the same time, and they didn't want to interfere with that. So they couldn't come up with a single protest. Their differences were too great, and they had to split into two different protests. So what's that tell you? Again, I come from sports. I look for little signs, I look for little tells, I look for scouting report that tells me what's really going on. Because let's say football, it's chaos. You can't really tell by looking at the big picture. You got to drill down a little bit and look for the little clue that opens everything up. And that's what I'm going to do with you right here. See, if the No Kings protest was so important, so legitimate, they would have had one protest because the overwhelming need to have this protest is bigger than my own little petty differences. But if I can't even get together over one little protest here in Richmond, Virginia, that tells you this is not legitimate. See, what you're seeing isn't unity. What you're seeing is packaging. And here in Richmond, they couldn't package it together and get together with their own little petty differences to have one big rally. So they split into two. And that tells me all I need to know. Because again, it's not unity, it's packaging. Different groups, different agendas with nothing in common except they all hate Donald Trump. That's not a movement, that's a big pile. So let me explain this to you a little bit more. We're being told to represent something bigger than it actually does because of the numbers. So why do they have all these big numbers? Couple of reasons. Because they need these big numbers so they can tell you that it's a mass uprising, even though we agree on nothing. Because if you just had one of these groups standing out there, they look like those crazy preachers that you see standing on campuses yelling at everybody, including the Christians. They'd be that crazy guy with the sign screaming into the sky, yelling into the wind. But if I'm able to stand there with enough people, you see the forest and you don't see the trees. And it becomes this massive uprising, even though we don't agree on anything except we hate Donald Trump. That's the one thing that brings us together. They scream, he's a dictator. The reality is, millions protested him freely with full media coverage. By the way, that whole thing, he's a dictator, this is a no king. I'm going to tell you something. If Donald Trump was a dictator, he's really bad at it. Because dictators don't let millions of people take to the street and trash him, call him names, lie about him, and not do anything about it. And if he was a king, that's the worst king we've ever seen, that he allows these protests to go on. You see, here's the reality. Which side acts like a monarchy, where they crown and anoint the next ruler? Donald Trump went through a primary where nobody wanted him there. The established Republicans didn't like him, the media didn't like him, society didn't like him, Hollywood didn't like him, the music industry hated him, the media hated him, and the academics, well, they held him in complete contempt. But the American people said, I want that guy to be president. He got elected. Nobody anointed him, nobody crowned him. In fact, they stood in his way to try to stop him from getting there. So who acts more like a monarch? The Republicans or the Democrats? The Democrats had Joe Biden, who they hid away from us, didn't let us see that he was feeble and couldn't do the job anymore. And when he finally got exposed because he had to debate Donald Trump, what did they do? The man that the Democrats overwhelmingly elected to be their nominee to run for president, they stuck a shiv in his back. It took him out. Nancy Pelosi went and put a knife in his back and threw him out to pasture. And instead of having the votes or the little mini primary that Barack Obama wanted, no, they just chose to crown Kamala Harris, who didn't have a single vote, to be their nominee, and anointed her to be the nominee to be the next leader of the free world. Which sounds like a monarchy? The one where the people elected Donald Trump to be the nominee to run for president, or the one where the Democrats stuck the knife in the back of Joe Biden, who had been elected to be their nominee, and installed and crowned Kamala Harris to be their nominee? Which seems more like a monarchy? Which seems more like a dictator? The president of the United States that has people protesting him wherever he goes, calling him filthy names, making up these ridiculous stories and have these outrageous signs? Or the people that during COVID shut down society, locked you in your house, told you you couldn't go to work, made you lose your job, told you you couldn't walk on the beach, threw sand and skateboard ramps, wouldn't let you go to parks, and how dare you say anything that went against what they were telling you, because they would actually take away your free speech and deplatform you from social media, kick you off social media platforms, throttle down so nobody saw what you had to say, and silenced you. So which one's more like a monarch? Republicans or Democrats? Which one's more like a dictator? Republicans or Democrats? I don't know. But here's what I do know. I want you to hear this. I want you to hear this clearly. This is not one big grassroots movement. These are a bunch of fringe movements that got together under the umbrella of I hate Donald Trump and I hate the Republicans, and that's what unites them. Because once you look at them, and I've been in the crowd before, I've stood there in the middle of these No Kings protests, and I just stood there, and they're looking at me, hey, look, there's a brown guy over there. Hey, come on over here and join us. It's like every time I show up at an anti-ICE demonstration, they come over, they see a brown guy, like, hey, come on over here. We're standing up for your people. And I tell them, I support ICE. And they look at me like, how dare you? It's so funny. The look on their face if I tell them, tú eres un comunista. And I don't speak Spanish that well, but if I tell them, tú eres un comunista, which is, I think you're a communist, the look on their face is just, how dare someone not stand here and support me? I mean, you look at them. This was pointed out by just about everybody. What did you see? Fringe people and a bunch of leftover hippies. A bunch of baby boomers standing out there trying to relive Woodstock. I mean, think of the people that make up this coalition that we're seeing out there at the No Kings protest. There's No War Peaceniks, led by Jane Fonda, who's back, baby. There's pro-Palestine, keffiyeh-wearing anti-Semites. There's the LGBTQ Rainbow Warriors. There's BLM activists. They actually had communist flag wavers in New York City, waving the red flag with the hammer and sickle of communism. There's Antifa anarchists. There's abortion rights advocates. Wow, there's just so many different people. But the one thing that was pretty amazing is none of them have anything in common other than they hate Donald Trump. And the media and their supporters would tell you there were 8 million people out there protesting over the weekend. No, there were 8 million people out there protesting with very different agendas that all coalesced under an umbrella of I hate Donald Trump. It was the liberal agenda at its finest under one umbrella. But here's the scouting report on this. This happens a lot when people want to have revolutions. Think about, I'll take the Soviet Union. They had a bunch of different people came together, had a revolution, and then what happened? Because they had all these divergent agendas, they ended up purging most of them that didn't agree with Lenin, and he killed them all. Chairman Mao, all these other ruthless dictators, they come to power because they get a bunch of different people with different points of view, and they all say, yes, we're going to rise up together until someone takes over, and then he gets rid of all the rest of them. You're starting to see that now when you see some of these protests, and you see someone out there with a rainbow flag protesting in favor of Hamas and the people that support Hamas, like, we're not going to support you. You see a little bit of that. But if you just listen to the coverage of the No Kings, there's 8 million people out here. Yeah, there's 8 million individuals out there, all with a different agenda that united underneath "We Hate Donald Trump." You're not looking at a movement. You're not looking at a movement. You're looking at a crowd that's pretending to be one voice, even though all of them have a different agenda. And that's the beauty of the No Kings protest. It really is not a No Kings protest. It's a bunch of people that are on the fringe, getting together, finding other fringe people, finding a voice, and fooling the rest of us because it's all prepackaged. It's all prepackaged and thrown out that way by the media to make you think that there really is this groundswell of support, and there's not. Because if there was that one big groundswell of support, our local No Kings rally wouldn't have fractioned into two over something of their petty differences, because the moment would have been too big and too strong to have two rallies and not just one. You want to comment? 833-804-1140, 833-804-1140 is the number for you to join us.